as we talked about in the last segment in relation to race and corporate power, uh, in a lot of ways, we're at our nadir here with Trump in office and corporate power being at its, I hope, zenith. If it gets any more powerful than this, I don't know what we're going to do. Um, let's go to the heart of the topic. What's your sense of what the future looks like? Is there a chance that we could rein in the power of the fossil fuel industry enough to actually get real action on climate change? Or are you worried that we're not going to be able to do it in enough time?
Um, I think in this line of work, it would be a hazard for me to be unsure. But one thing I can tell you is that I think what I have seen in the streets, what I have seen in the eyes of our youth, what I have seen in the eyes of our elders who've been at this for a long time, banging the pans and letting people know this was coming, it feels like for those folks, it's a do or die moment. And so if I were to believe that what we're seeing is the height of power for folks who would not see fossil fuels go down willingly, I think it's our duty to fight them and make them go down in a way that doesn't displace any more people than were already on that list. So it feels to me like the vision of the future is a broader movement where we put a lot of the stuff we've been holding in our back pocket aside and run in the same direction. So I do feel like we have an opportunity to make change because we have no other choice, and that's the best motivator I know of.
So, Tamara, when we talk about these issues, there's no choice but to talk about politics. So, if, for example, Trump wins re-election, uh, we know what we're going to get. Absolutely, not only no action, but going in the wrong direction for 4 straight years. 4 years we cannot afford to lose on this issue, let alone the other ones. But this one, we're literally running out of time. And so, so that's clear. If Biden wins, though, he says no Green New Deal. We're going to go back into the Paris Climate Accord, but we're really not going to do much more than that. How do you react to that? And if you think that's not good enough, what do you do about it?
I'm going to choke back my actual thoughts about going back into the Paris Climate Accords. I think there would have been an okay idea in 2009. I think it's such a waste of energy in this current moment that it's laughable to say out loud, kind of like people saying we were going to end fossil fuels or make that a public demand 10 years ago. But I do think that it's Biden's right to say what he will and won't do. It's our job to force him to do better. So those of us who care about what the future is going to look like, who are here on behalf of communities that never had a seat at the table, are just as happy undoing the president we support as undoing the president we don't. And so a Biden presidency offers us an opportunity to live another day, to fight another fight. And that is the thing we're pushing for. Opening up space through mobilization and dialogue and really clear thinking is our job to force them to rethink it and to push Congress to do its job in enabling all of the pieces of that would have to come together. So we have a whole suite of climate demands that don't change regardless of what the outcome is. The difference is probably the amount of force that we use to get it.
Okay, I want to come back to that idea of force in a second, but anyone who watches the show knows I agree. Okay, so Ti-Hua, you write about the connection of the votes on the environment with perhaps the donations they might be getting from corporate interests to motivate that. So, having written about that for some time now, what's your sense of how deeply connected those two things are? If we did not have a system where politicians were funded by campaign contributions, would we have already taken much more dramatic action on climate change?
I'm not sure, actually, because it's so ingrained and the connections are so deeply set between the corporate power and the political power. But clearly, like Citizens United does alter the landscape in the sense that, money buys campaigns, in many cases buys elections. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez notwithstanding. But, so I think even if sort of regardless of what would have happened, there will still be that connection between the wealthiest people in the fossil fuel companies and somewhere in the banks, et cetera. And one financial analyst said to me, It's very simple why all those banks invested in fossil fuel, because it gave them the most return in the last few years. And that's all they're concerned about, is the concept of the quarterly return. As long as we think in those terms that every quarter CEOs and managers live and die on whatever the profit is on the quarter, instead of thinking on the long term, I think we won't see that kind of change. But one thing I would say, though, is with the difference between the Donald Trump and the Joe Biden, at least with Joe Biden, there'll be a discussion. There is no discussion with Donald Trump. And it is, like, I like to say, Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal, 16 trillion, which I think is closer to the reality. Joe Biden was 2 trillion, but to me, Donald Trump is minus 16 trillion. So at least with Joe Biden, there's a possibility of some discussion, debate on, some bills, and there'll be, because right now there is none. For the longest time, I think I quoted you on this, Tamara, was in that article of why no Green New Deal, not even a bill, when I wrote that article a couple of months ago. So now I think we'll see that there's a chance to, yes, put pressure on Joe Biden. Before, you couldn't put pressure. I mean, just this week, Donald Trump's EPA said they're now going to start reducing methane, the regulations on methane, which is a key contributor to the carbonization in the atmosphere. So it's like one thing after the other, with Donald Trump. It's just like there's no discussion there.
So look, you both put it so great. I want people to just be clear on what Ti-Hua just said. It's not that there's going to be a check on methane. There's going to be a check on regulations of methane.
Right.
We're going backwards. We're going massively backwards under Trump. I love what Tamara said. We're going to, under Biden, you live to fight another day. And to Ti-Hua's point about how with Trump, you just talking to a brick wall. Just yesterday, he says the 1917 flu. Now, look, it's known as the 1918 flu, but that's not the relevant part. The relevant part is that he has made that same mistake half a dozen times. Presumably, people told him, hey, Mr. President, it's embarrassing. It's not just the flu that happened in 1918. It's known as the 1918 flu. And he's like, nope, 1917. So there's just no talking to the guy.
I don't want to insult people who are mentally challenged, but there was a term that was used before called idiot savant. And I think in some ways, to me, Donald Trump is an idiot savant in the sense that he's a brilliant marketer and con man, but he is so stupid on other things. I mean, he genuinely is so anti-science and anti-intellectual, and he seems really genuinely dumb. Like there were reports about he doesn't even read reports. The CIA said they had to do these big charts like you do when you do at a press conference with nice graphics and big pictures. And those are the only things he can actually understand. Anyway.
I feel like I agree with you on at least half of that term. It's not my sense that every person's penchant towards some form of genius shouldn't be rewarded. But my sense is that we're not dealing with regressive politics. We're dealing with regressive thinking and like a regressive structure inside a degraded shell of a human. So like all of those things being on the table, we're not up against ideologues. That would be great because it would suggest that there are ideas. So what we're fighting is not the contest of ideas for whose truth about the future is true. We're fighting about whose pockets can be lined by continuing to avoid that question.
Yeah, 100%. So look, that's easy. That's relatively easy. But now let's talk about things that are hard. The Democrats. So Tamara, let me ask you, if they got the Senate and the House and the White House, do you think the Democrats are actually going to do anything substantive on climate change?
Yes. And the reason I believe so is because there are so many of us. There have been a lot of contests for climate champions who've been measured by it, which hasn't happened. The environmental lobby's been slow behind getting into the driver's seat for so long that it has a lot to make up for. So in terms of providing the right information, recognizing the pressure points, combining that with the targeted campaigning, and really talking to people in that kitchen table organizing way that really challenges people's preconceived notions, I think that we will give no choice. We're not giving any quarter to a conversation that isn't about climate because all of us are already paying the price for that. So I think between conservatives who want to secretly be supportive of this stuff and thank us behind closed doors for creating a mobilization space big enough for them to make a suggestion that keeps them from being organized by their own colleagues out of a good idea, we have some space. For Democrats who recognize that, like, the difference between divestment and defund is a question of who you're talking to and when the conversation is happening. I think there's so many levers. We have done a solid job of connecting climate to everything else. So there are very few things that could be raised in a functioning Congress that we can't connect to climate.
Cenk, if I could add a point to that, you know,
Yep.
I have teenage kids, and I think the mobilization of young people in particular, people who are going to be alive in 2050, is also going to be a key as well. That once there's a vaccine and people can demonstrate again, and even now on the internet, I know a lot of these teenagers are organizing, and they're very, very serious about dealing with climate change, much more so than anyone who's older, and including millennials. And I see among teenagers now a very, very deep understanding and a real commitment to make sure that this planet's still around when they become adults.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.